when you stop focusing exclusively on yourself and your own experiences and your own traumas and your own, there's a time and a place to do that. But actually, when you start getting into, I wonder if I could just help somebody else, ego moves out the way, and something else more fulfilling moves into its place.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Second Mind, the show that empowers you to become the greatest version of yourself. To give you the fuel to master your potential, we showcase amazing journeys, ideas, and mindsets of inspiring people who live and think differently. Our guest today is Adam Laidler, a UK-based counsellor, public speaker, and life coach whose journey has featured hallucinogenic drinks, depression, and a shaman. Adam has created his life coaching business, Me Being Adam, helping people grow and optimize their well-being. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me along.
No problem. I just wanted to start off by something that really interested me when I was reading a little bit up on your website. You've built your life coaching business, and we can get into the story of how that came to be in itself. But you built it almost around the principle of being open and transparent with yourself, sort of openly admitting that you're not this like life coach who has like a perfect life and everything's going like absolutely well all of the time. Like you've got your flaws as much as everybody else. And I was very interested that you've put that as like a front headline to make it really like relatable. Was that a really like conscious decision to go through with that?
Yeah, I guess it was. The one thing that really frustrates me is when you see life coaches on Instagram and they've got like these perfect or seemingly perfect lives where they're on the beach sipping cocktails, or they're traveling around the world, or they're stepping out of luxury aircraft and stuff, and somehow painting out that should be the life that you aspire towards. And I think that it's ironic to call those people life coaches, because I class myself as in the healing space, in the helping space. So to give somebody that kind of image to aspire towards, which is totally unattainable. I don't know anybody that doesn't carry the human insecurities that we all carry, the desire for love, the desire for connection, the desire for belonging. So I did make a conscious decision. Yeah, Me Being Adam was all about sharing as much as I felt comfortable of my personal experiences with the people that follow me, and wanted to be just like, look, I'm just an average guy struggling through life the same as you, and maybe there would be something that would resonate with people about that, rather than me being on that beach sipping a cocktail. Yeah,
and I feel like that's an image that is far too prevalent in our society nowadays, with the way that social media is like warping our perception of how other people are living their lives. I feel like if people are seeking help and they're feeling that even the people who are like offering support and help, they almost seem like their life is unattainable, then it's almost like a no-win there.
Yeah, and we have to remember that social media is just a highlight reel, and that's fundamentally forgotten when people are, we know that social media is addictive. The founders of social media platforms are now coming out and saying, actually, we know the science behind what we did. We're playing on the chemicals in the brain, things like dopamine, and getting people to engage with our platforms in an addictive way. And I think, when you take that into consideration, so we're addicted to looking at these lives and following people, but we're following a highlight reel. And sometimes we forget to put that critical filter on and say, what am I looking at here? This life coach or this person that I follow, this celebrity that seem to be just having all this amazing experience. Well, you're not seeing the bit where they're picking up socks off the bathroom floor. You're not seeing the bit where they're crying because their heart's been broken, or they're upset because somebody rejected them. That you don't see the fullness of that person's experience. You just see the very small highlights. And I think when you internalize that, it can bring about all sorts of feelings of shame about, well, my life's not good enough because it's not like this highlight reel. But we're fundamentally forgetting that that isn't truth. And that's something that with my platform I try to be really conscious of. And whilst at the same time as I'm not putting every bit of sadness on there, I try and balance it out between, look, I've been struggling this week and this is why I've been struggling. And even I had some feelings about, should I be doing that? Will people come to me as a life coach, as a therapist, if I'm there saying, my life's not great all the time? But it felt fundamentally important to just have a real existence and to show people that. But also, part of what I want people to understand is that social media needs a critical filter. And it's the behavior that it drives is to serve a powerful few, and it's the people that are invested in the platforms.
Yeah. So it's almost like people when they're viewing social media is to have that awareness to say, this has been developed, with those sort of like dopamine cycles and stuff like that, to make me want to come back, and it's going to make me feel a certain way. But if they can observe that and then at least be aware of it, so then they can know that, okay, this isn't like a natural thing, and they can like pull away from it and say, actually, like, this is the state of how things are. People are way more like me than I think. There's not this big distance between me and society. Like, we're all in this together.
Yeah, it's about just, I suppose, recognizing the system that you're part of. And it feels to me a little bit at the moment like the tail is wagging the dog, is the old expression. The social media is addictive. We know that people are addicted to their phones. I read somewhere the other day that people on average check their phones 150 times a day. So that's everybody. So, I know that my nan's got a phone. She's not checking it 150 times a day, which means some people are probably checking it into the thousands. What does that mean for us culturally? Well, it means that we're the slave to the technology, and actually the technology should be the one that's serving us. So part of my work is about waking people up to the influences that they're put under, and it's about having a critical mind. It's about critically looking at your experience. So everything from social media through to the political landscape, through to marketing messages that we're receiving, just every bit of stimulus that you're receiving, we should be asking the same questions of who wrote it, what's their agenda, what are they trying to get from me? And if you look at all marketing as just take one example, anti-aging cream, it's just it's not even discreet about the fact that it's shaming you into feeling that you're not enough. I feel for anybody that's in that bracket where perhaps they are starting to feel that they're aging a little bit. And one of the adverts I watched the other day started that the opening line was, "Do you ever feel invisible?" And that's playing into a fundamental insecurity that every single one of us has, which is a fear of disconnection from the other. So once you start to get a critical mind and you think, hold on a second, the whole marketing industry is just exploiting a human vulnerability for profit, then you have a choice about whether you opt in or opt out of that. And I think that can be really empowering, and that's some of the messages that I try and do is, if you want to invert commas, like exit the matrix. It's like just be critical of your experience and don't take it that everything that's being served to you is for your benefit, because trust me, it's not.
Yeah, everyone has an agenda with what they're putting out, and for marketing especially, I think people who are creating those ads, they're just trying to have success for their business, but maybe they don't see the higher picture that they're creating their advert, but also every other marketing company is creating their advert. And when we're experiencing this really heavily bombarding media society, you just see so many every single day, even subliminally. And it's interesting how those over time, even if you do have a more resilient mindset to it, they can still play into your insecurities. And even when you're in the corner shop, you look over at the magazines, and on the front covers of all the men's and women's magazines, you can see these sort of model-esque people with their sort of inadvertent perfect body.
Yeah.
And just sort of seeing those on a regular basis, even though that that's not what normal people look like, then it's still influencing you on a deeper level, maybe.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, really. We can't ever know. I mean, the fact that it's subliminal by definition means it's out of our awareness, doesn't it? It's out of our conscious awareness. So, but knowing that stuff is happening for us outside of our conscious awareness can really bring about a sense of empowerment, because you do have your own agency, you do have the ability to make decisions, and those decisions are influenced ultimately by some of the subconscious stuff, but some of the overt stuff. I read somewhere the other day, even our household appliances now are being branded as fashionable because the people that are creating them don't want them to be thrown away when they're broken. They want them to be thrown away when they don't look trendy anymore in the kitchen. So, what's that all about? It's just it's about the economy that we survive on is called capitalism, and capitalism relies on people buying things more and more every year. So that's why we have to keep creating new industries. We have to keep creating new markets for people so that we can keep spending more money. Well, how do you get people to spend money? Well, fundamentally, you get them to think that they either need that product to be enough, or without that product, they're going to be abandoned by their communities. And that's the source of most marketing. And once you're aware of that, you can start to make conscious decisions about whether or not you engage. And this is a podcast about mental health. So what's the link? Well, to me, it's pretty obvious, because if you're being shamed by all of these external influences and you're being conditioned, then it's going to have an impact, especially when those things are playing on our vulnerabilities, because it goes to the deepest part of our brain, which is, we want to be loved, we want to feel connected to other people, and we want to feel like we belong somewhere. And all of those messages are doing the opposite of that, or they're playing on that. They're saying, you know what, if you don't get the latest phone, you're not going to be cool, and people aren't going to necessarily like you because you've not got the latest phone. And I'm not professing to be here. The whole journey of me being Adam is like, I haven't got all the answers. I definitely haven't got all the answers, and I don't want to be in some lofty space where I'm like, guys, you just need to come and join me in this Zen tower where I'm completely detached from all of this. I'm a product of this society. We're sat in a studio with equipment that has been created by this economy and this culture. So, but I think there's a time for us where we can start turning it into good. We can use social media to influence in different ways, to promote messages of positivity and not play on those hooks that we all have.
Well, it seems like you've become very much more aware of all of these sort of fundamental little nooks and crannies and flaws in society, which can really progressively gnaw away at people. But I take it that hasn't always been your mindset. Take me back to sort of before you started your life coaching business. So what sort of space were you in, even before? I know that you had a stint where you went traveling, and I take it you had no plans to create such a business or have the lifestyle that you have now.
No, I definitely didn't. I was very much in the matrix. I was part of everything that I've just described. So if I can wind back, I'm 34 this year, but if I wind back to when I was 18, I was promised a dream. I was told by the people around me growing up that, what you need to do is you need to go to school, you need to get a good education, then you need to get a good job, then you need to meet a partner, buy a house together, get married, have kids, all that kind of stuff, and then you'll be happy. And if you're not happy, it just means you haven't worked hard enough, and these images, just kept flashing up about what is success. Well, success is this salary, it's that car, it's that house. So I became completely one track minded in terms of wanting those things. So I would be, I remember when I was 18, I couldn't afford a car. I couldn't afford a decent car, and probably the car that I could afford would be maybe less than £1,000. But I thought, I can't drive around in that sort of a car. So I went and pushed myself to get a brand new Mini on HP. Couldn't afford it really, but I took a loan out to buy a car just so I could have the status of, I'm driving around in a brand new car, because I thought that'll make me feel worthy. And then so I got the car, and after about a week of driving it, I thought, well, that's not worked. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to push myself harder at work so I can get a promotion and I can step up from team leader to be a team manager, because I was absolutely obsessed with status and job titles and earning potential. So I went on this mission, and the reason why I ended up running my own business ultimately, not the life coaching business, but the one before this, was I wanted to be a director. I wanted the status of director, even if it was just of one person. I wanted the business card that said MD on it, because I wasn't satisfied with the status of just being a manager for a banking group. So sure enough, I quit my job that was paying reasonably well, went to earn peanuts and set up my own business. But it was always driven by a fear of not being enough. It was never driven by wanting to do good by others. I was just so caught up in it. And ultimately, my journey that led me to where I am now is that it just became too much. I had a nagging voice in my head that whole time saying, this won't make you happy. This won't make you happy. but it was so faint. That voice was so faint and so distant that it didn't feel true. It felt like almost like, what is that? Whose is that voice? Now I now know that it was the higher self within me kind of trying to look out for me. But that higher self is never critical. It's just there and it's present, and it will give you guidance if you can tune into it. But at the time I was so distracted and I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have any tools available to me. All I knew was more, bigger, better. So I just ignored that, and I carried on, and I ignored that, and I carried on. I had a bereavement in my family, which was probably the thing that triggered the start of the downfall. And I do some talks, and I claim this moment as the universe coming down and giving me a gentle slap round the face and saying, you really need to listen now, because it was awful seeing a family member die and going through that experience and having a sense of my own mortality. But even then I didn't have the tools to stop doing what I was doing. So I thought, I know what this means. It means I've got to set up an office in a big city in the UK. You know, I'm from Worcester. That's where the company was founded. But I was like, no, I need a city office and a city pad. And I just carried on going. And eventually it had to stop because it just wasn't making me happy.
It seems like a lot of people who have had seemingly like a transformation such as yours, changes over many years, they are dealt these sort of incremental sort of slaps from the universe, saying like, if it were to use that analogy of the Matrix, it's like wake up, wake up, and at first maybe they're like smaller and they seem like indistinguishable from normal life, but actually as they become more and more sort of like regular, it seems like it's directing you towards one thing. Obviously it's your choice to listen to those, like you were saying, listen to your higher self, and like the universe, the way it's directing you. I take it there was a point where you obviously seemingly like lost everything. I know you had issues with your business, and issues in your personal life, which led you to a place which maybe you were feeling like a little bit depressed and like a bit of a dead end. Tell me through what was running through your mind, and what sort of flipped your direction, the tipping point where you were like, right, I'm going this way now, and I don't know where it's going to take me, but it feels like better than where I was right now.
Yeah, it was a really, really difficult year for me, 2015, so 3 years ago now. And I'd been having these slaps from the universe sort of to say, wake up, wake up, wake up. And that year, my now ex-partner of 13 years at the time came out with a story about his early childhood sexual abuse, and he's a very public speaker about that, and he sort of campaigns for survivors up and down the country. And he was getting all this press coverage, and he was getting all these interviews, radios wanted to speak to him, broadcasters wanted to speak to him to understand like his brave story. And I remember thinking at the time how I wanted to be there for him as this supportive partner, as his proud husband standing next to him. But I was just so consumed with jealousy at the attention and the validation that he was getting, that I couldn't do it. You know, he was accumulating all this status, and all this heroic language was being sort of directed at him, and I just felt so worthless because I still had this notion in my head that, you know, status is what makes you worthy, and the amount of people that follow you on Instagram is what makes you worthy as a person. So that led to, you know, notwithstanding all of my behavior throughout that relationship was very hard on a relationship, because I was doing the more, bigger, better, and that was exhausting for both of us. But that became almost like the tipping point for me, and I remember thinking, something's wrong. My wiring is fundamentally wrong, that when my partner is going through something so distressing, I can't be present with that because I'm too chewed up with resentment and shame about that. And that was kind of the start of the demise for me. So that was probably January 2015. That ultimately led to an unreconcilable breakup in our relationship. And unbeknownst to me, the company that we'd built up over the last sort of previous 9 years, we'd got a rogue finance director that had been profiting from the bank account illegally. So the relationship ended in the July, and the company then went into liquidation in the October, so just a few months later. And I remember at that point thinking, wow, this is what's the message here? But there was still, even then, there was still a part of me that was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to set up another company tomorrow, doing the same thing, and rescue these staff, and then I'll be the hero. So that's exactly what I did. I set up another business. I carried over some of the people that were going to lose their jobs, and we went for it again. And it was actually in the Christmas of 2015, the December, that I had a night where I just completely went off the rails, and I'd been using drugs, alcohol and casual sex as a kind of a crutch to get me through heartbreak and to get me through the loss of my business. All pillars of my identity were being ripped away from me. It was almost like, I look at it now as the universe stripping me bare, and me just desperately clambering to not be stripped bare, because it was not a pleasant experience. But my best friend, who's been my friend since college, kind of sat with me one evening in Manchester, and she just said, I don't know what's happening to you, but this isn't you, and you need to stop. And she was referencing my destructive behaviour. So at that point, I sat all the team down, and I said, I can't do it anymore. I don't want to run this business. I did it because I thought it would be heroic, and it would give me status. But I recognise now that something is telling me that it's not meant to be. I'm literally killing myself through my behaviour, so it's got to stop. And so December 2015 was when it stopped, and I did what everyone does when they're going through a midlife crisis, and book a load of travel. Of course that's what you do.
One-way ticket.
Yeah, and there was still remnants there even then of, I updated all my social media feeds to say that I was going to be a world traveller. I mean, I still hadn't learned the lesson, but I guess in many ways I'd taken some of it and said, no, I can't keep running this business. I can't keep doing this. It's got to stop. So that was the biggest turning point, really. But that's what tipped me into depression. So I think I've been running for a long time. And there's a really good analogy for trauma, which is, back in the day we'd be picking berries in the forest, a saber-toothed tiger would jump out, and we'd be left thinking, what you're not thinking is, oh, what a lovely blue sky, what a lovely tiger, I better probably get a jog on now. You don't think any of those things. You just go straight into flight mode and you run away, and you keep running until you've got no energy left, and eventually you stop. And it's when you stop and you look down at your body and you see the wounds that you've accumulated through all that running and stress. And that's probably what was happening in the start of 2016, because I'd finally stopped, and all of probably a lifetime's worth of running caught up on me, and my body just went nope, and I tipped into depression.
Yeah, so it was like this knee-jerk reaction from your body. And it's interesting how you're saying that even after you'd exited you were exiting your business, after trying to start another one, you still felt like transitioning into that traveler mode, it would be still about sort of feeding the ego in a slight way, which being like, I'm being the traveler, and like bringing back the whole thing around sort of social media and people knowing that you're traveling, rather than being there and being present and being in tune with the experience. It's almost like it's rather than like an on-off switch for sort of like waking up to being present, it's more like a fader, as you will. And so that's the start of your process of turning it the other way. And that seems like your business as well, it is very like based around, it seems, progressive growth. So you're saying that there's no point that you get to that you're chasing where this is it. It's all about progressive growth and being all about the process. And so did you feel like, as in your time traveling, you were becoming more and more in tune with that as you went on? So it started at the beginning as if you were very much more focused on how you're being perceived as a traveler, and then by the end of your experience it was, I am feeling much more in tune with the experiences, and I'm actually like living these in a more like genuine way.
Yeah, you probably hit the nail on the head. I like the fader analogy because I'm naturally analytical. My go-to is, right, I've got a problem, how can I fix it? And when I become aware of something, I'm like, right, what books can I read? What theory can I grab hold of to make this better? But it was progressive. It had started off probably when my auntie died 5 years previous to the travelling experience, that had been the sort of the first sign of kind of waking up a little bit. But then, then the relationship breaking, then the company breaking, and then seeing my own destructive behaviours. But I guess, I was punitive about, like, I know my life is awful and I know I want it to be different, and can we just get that to happen overnight, please? Can we just sort that out? And when I went traveling with my depression. So I got diagnosed a week before I went. My family were just absolutely beside themselves because I was clearly depressed. I was all of the symptoms ticking those boxes 3 times over. And I now class myself as fortunate to have had the opportunity to travel with depression, because what depression did for me was it literally depressed everything else, and I had to be with myself. So I travelled alone. I went on some groups and I met up with some people, so I wasn't in solitude, but there were times when I was very much on my own. And the depression when you're living in a Western world is difficult because there's pressures on us to perform, there's pressures on us to go to work. We've got all these shaming messages around us. Depression in Southeast Asia is very different. Depression in South America is different because those same pressures aren't present, so you can sit with the depression without the shame. And I listened to it and I was like, what is this telling me? And it was dark. There were some really dark things in there. I had to face up to the way that I treated people, the way that I treated myself, the fact that I had denied my own humanity at times, and it was awful. It was an awfully dark experience. But I was able to start seeing what it was that had gone wrong. I was like, yeah, I've ignored that voice in my mind that knew that this wasn't going to make me happy. I've trampled over people to get places for purposes of status. I've chosen materialism as a route to fulfillment when it was so obvious that was never going to be a route to fulfillment. So I class myself as, I'm quite outspoken about this. I think when people are diagnosed with depression, it is a signal from their body and their mind to make an assessment of where they're at. But unfortunately, not everybody has the luxury or the opportunity to sit with their depression, because some people have got families, some people have got jobs and they're the breadwinner, some people have got mortgages to pay, and a lot of people have got a lot of those things. So, ideally, I'd love it if we were like, oh, you've got depression, great, you're going to learn some stuff about yourself, but we need to take you out of the system for 6 months or 12 months or however long it takes for you to learn what it's trying to tell you. But we don't have that approach because we don't have the resources either as a culture or as an individual to afford that at all times.
And so on your traveling experience, you went and had ayahuasca, which is, I think, that the same compound it has DMT inside it.
Yes, it's DMT based. Yeah.
And do you think that substance, that psychedelic experience, allowed you to connect with where your depression was coming from, sort of really ultimately strip back everything? As you're saying, you'd be going through that process up until that time, but do you think that was like the really taking off all the armor and just looking at yourself as a bare human being, or as, in terms of like your soul almost, and seeing that true identity of like where it was coming from?
The hesitation there is that I'm not I don't endorse ayahuasca, and that surprises some people because I know that there are people that have done it who are like, you've got to do it. I think I was called to it, and it felt like a culmination of all the work that I'd been doing up to that point. So I'd had therapy, I'd been in psychotherapy, which was what kind of got me interested in wanting to be a psychotherapist myself. So I'd had a lot of counselling leading up to my travels. So I'd worked through a lot of stuff, and I'd started to do a lot of sense making. When I was travelling, I travelled through Central America, and bearing in mind a lot of my problems had been born out of a Western capitalist culture. America is that on steroids. So I'd kind of bared witness to what had been affecting me. And by the time I was looking to do ayahuasca, what I felt it did was, the expectancy was, I'm going to revisit a load of stuff and I'm going to put it to bed. And I did do that. But when you say, did it strip me bare? Yes, I transcended my body. I transcended my ego. I transcended everything that is known to me to become just a pure speck of awareness, and that awareness for me was love. It was just there was no space for anything else other than love. And I suddenly had this really strong epiphany that my purpose is to help other people. And actually, I believe that everyone's purpose is to help other people. We've become individualized as a society. We've become very focused on the self, to the detriment of all others. It's very much neoliberalism is built on that principle of, the trample over everyone else and just, there's opportunity for everyone, but you've got to get it. You've got to go out there and get it. And I saw all of that just exactly for what it was. It was the clarity. It was the clearing of the fog that just allowed me to almost believe for the first time that little voice in my head that had been telling me these things all my life wasn't false. It was true. I saw it and I experienced it, and I came back from that experience a very different person, an incredibly different person.
And it's quite an interesting procedure in itself, isn't it? The shamanic nature of it, and it's a very interesting take on drug use, because it's a very like spiritual ceremony, and it's not like the sort of recreational drug use that we know in the Western world, where people will go out on the weekend and take like MDMA or whatever. It seems like a very like planned, methodical process. But what interests me particularly is that you're alluding to the fact that anyone can get to that point of realization without any excess substances, any external substances, sorry. So people can go along their own personal journeys, but it's the evaluation of themselves that still needs to happen, and be that through like work with a councillor, or just spending time like meditating themselves, or if they do decide to take something like ayahuasca, it's all like taking you through the same process, just through different doors.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't see ayahuasca as a drug. I see it as a medicine. And the shamans would suggest that it is that. It has a DMT compound, which we class as a drug over in the West, but you could argue it's semantics. But yeah, can you get to the same place? Of course you can. I think what my issue was my ego was fierce. I had a strong ego, and I now know through the psychotherapy that I've done since coming back that ego was there from a child to protect me. So it served me well, but it became the center of me. And the thing that I learned through ayahuasca was that I have the ability to transcend my ego. So when my ego's going, you need to get that new phone because you're going to be left out. Just this morning, I was in the Apple store, and I was looking around for a cable, and I saw the new iPhone, and I was like, I need that. And I was like, no, that's my ego, and that's the fact that I'm in a store that is designed to make me feel that way. So I can tap into my own agency and walk out that store and say, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, I don't skip out the store and go, yeah, higher self won, because I'm still subject to all the subliminal messages that brings about. But there is a sense of like, oh yeah, I can make decisions about this. I'm not beholden to the system. So ayahuasca, yes, it's definitely a tool, but I think you can get to the same place. And I think if you're working with somebody that's skilled enough, or you meditate, meditation is about transcending ego. The minute that you start to realize that you are part of something much bigger than just your individual self, that to me is the gateway into more fulfillment. When you stop focusing exclusively on yourself and your own experiences and your own traumas and your own, there's a time and a place to do that. But actually, when you start getting into, I wonder if I could just help somebody else, ego moves out the way, and something else more fulfilling moves into its place.
Off on a little tangent, there was something that someone recommended to me recently, which was to improve your quality of sleep. Sometimes it'd be cool to just write down on a bit of paper who you have helped that day and how, and someone that's helped you. And it seems like such a really simple thing, but actually quite humbling in the way that sometimes you won't know what to write down at all. So you're not even opening your eyes to how others are contributing positively to your life. And then sometimes you're not actually engaging with others and helping them. And for your experiences traveling, you had that process, and now through your business, you're taking part in that process of helping others, taking all of those learnings and your continued learnings, I'm sure it's the process, and then helping empower other people to optimize their own well-being. And so this is feeling like your direction from now. This is your sort of calling to help others.
Yeah, it feels like my purpose, and I know when I do like my talks that the time just seems to become, it doesn't make any sense. Like it can feel like the talks lasted 5 minutes or 5 hours, and that means I'm in flow, because I think when you're in touch with your true purpose, like you're just in tune with yourself. There's something about you're in the moment, you're present doing what it is that you're here and meant to do. So when you can kind of get out the way of, oh, what do they think about this? What do they think about that? Should I be? Shouldn't? And you just find that purpose. And we've all got one. We've all got the dreams that we have about, oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. And some of them are impossible. If you've got certain physical limitations that stop you doing certain things. But it's just about kind of tuning in with. There's something about helping other people. There's something about, you look at the happiest people, and they're often in service to others, and that's not to say that, I see myself as part of that. So self-care, self-compassion, the way that I talk to myself, all of those things, the food I put in my body, I see myself as part of the people that I serve. I serve myself as well as I serve others, but it's when it becomes exclusively serving yourself. And that, I love that idea that it was recommended to you, because it's sort of, there's so much in that, isn't there? There's gratitude, there's self-awareness, there's kind of stepping out of self. There's a lot that can do that, and I'm trying to, through the coaching practice and the therapeutic work that I do, trying to bring some of these lessons that I've had, and ultimately sometimes I think people need to learn them themselves. They need to have the catastrophe, but there are some people who are open and receptive to other people's learnings, and if they're on the brink of a catastrophe, to hear my story and say, actually, do you know what, you don't need to go into that space. Maybe there's a place for you to step back from that and just do some assessment here. That's kind of what I'm about.
And it's cool that you've had this very defined process of, before you were really enabling yourself to deeply and meaningfully help others, you had to first help yourself. So like the self came first, and like as a headline, it seems very like, oh, I come first. Like, what's that about? But actually, it's about letting yourself be loved by yourself and accepting who you are and being comfortable with yourself. And then through that, you can most effectively help others.
Yeah, and I've got a ring that I wear that I've got made in Vietnam, and it says "Learning to Love Me," because I feel like that's a lesson that I need to carry around with me at all times. When I hear myself say, "Oh, Adam, you idiot," I kind of remind myself that I wouldn't say that to somebody else. So why would I say it to myself? And any journey of healing starts with self, because otherwise all the cliches come out. You can't pour from an empty cup, all that kind of stuff. Put your own oxygen on first, all that. But they're cliches for a reason, aren't they? Because they tap into something. I believe cliches tap into truths that we know. So it does start with the self, and sometimes that can fit. We're told that that's selfish sometimes, but actually it becomes selfish when it becomes self-serving to a point of harm to others. When you're so self-serving that you don't see others suffering and help that, but actually to give to others when you are depleted yourself, actually it doesn't serve you or them, because you both lose out ultimately. So yeah, it did. It was probably a good solid chunk of time while I was working on me, and now I work with others. But that doesn't mean that I'm there's not space for me to work on myself. There always will be, and I maintain self-care practices because they're so important.
Awesome. Before I go on to my last question, before we wrap up, would you like to let people know where they could find you? Are there any online resources that people could go and visit to learn more about your work?
Yeah, this is where I get uncomfortable, because I have to bring ego to the fore, and my own therapist says, you've got to make a living, Adam. So yeah, my website's mebeingadam.com, and all of my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, that's all me being Adam, and on there you can find, you can subscribe to the tribe, as I've called it, and then I do kind of monthly emails to people to let them know what I'm up to. I've got my own podcast as well, which is the Me Being Adam podcast, which you're going to come on and be a guest at some point.
Very excited to do that.
So there's various different mediums that I try and communicate with people in this reality, not in spirit world or anything like that. Ayahuasca didn't take me that far, but yeah, that's how you can get hold of me.
Fantastic. And to finish off, if you had a phone call with the 18-year-old version of Adam, and you had 5 minutes to chat, what do you think you'd say to him? Wow,
that's a powerful question. I think I would say slow down, trust your intuition more, trust that voice that you know was there. I would talk to him about, true value doesn't come from the things you own, it comes from the person that you are. And I would encourage him to go about finding a practice of helping himself, but also helping others. So I think there's a space in all of our lives, whether it's a small bit of charity work, whether it's volunteering for, doing events or whatever it might be, there will be a space that you can create to help others. And there's just something about that that's nourishing and guides us to a better place.
I think that's a lovely note to end on. Adam, thank you very much for coming on.
You're welcome.
It's been great to chat.